Well, I started off as a corporate art director and a graphic designer early on in my career, and I think that kind of kept my intuition open. It let me, if you have to design a logo for someone, you have to feel who they are and what kind of things would symbolize what they want to represent. And so it was a good training because I grew up in the Midwest, and becoming a professional intuitive didn't exist back then, So it was a gradual process of working my way into it by following all my inner urges. And my inner urges were about mystery, finding out why things happened underneath the surface, bit by bit. So when I was in high school, even, I was reading about, psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain, and never thought I would be able to do it until I moved up to Northern California in my 20s and found out they had classes in developing clairvoyance, of all things. And I studied it. And it turned out, since I'd been pretty visual anyway and was able to see in pictures, that my visualization skills were high, and I didn't realize it. I was surprised when I could, look at someone and get images, and then they turned out to be accurate or to actually describe something about the person's real life.
So many people have used intuition to get by on their day-to-day lives. And you say that intuition happens to be the most powerful survival skill that we have right now, so that we should be using it all the time. Tell me about it.
Yes, well, part of what I've been observing over all these years and is that life is accelerating, and I'm sure you talk about this every night with everybody just about, but that information is proliferating, the bodies are vibrating faster, there's information overload, it's almost too much to process with our analytical linear mind. So we're needing to be able to process things much more directly and much faster with, just less time overall. And I always have called intuition direct knowing, where you don't have to have proof necessarily, but right in the moment you get a yes or a no. You get a sense of what to do, and almost sometimes whole understanding of the nuances that surround an issue. So part of it is that I think we're accelerating right now so much into, I would call it life in the present moment, that we need a new kind of perception that allows us to handle the amount of information that's available. And intuition is that way of perceiving. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't use logic and we don't use science.
Which you have to, I think.
Of course. But to me, that comes afterwards. It's the intuition is the first grasp of things. It's that first sense. And
but how many people don't realize that? They get these intuitive feelings. They're there, but they don't act on it.
No, they gloss over them.
Yeah, they do. And then they say, "Oh my, I knew this was going to happen, but I didn't do anything."
Yes. There are so many different ways that our minds will negate or gloss over or go, yes, but, and then, whatever comes after the but just negates the first part of it. And part of the intuition development process, of course, is really making an agreement with yourself to trust your first impressions. And I have this practice now that I do, which is I call it my inner perceiver. It's like that part of us inside that notices things.
Yes.
You and I could walk down the street together, the same street, and my inner perceiver would notice probably a whole different sequence of things than yours might. And that would mean our realities would be different. And I notice what I notice, I figure, because I need to notice it.
Sure.
Because I'm trying to show myself something or teach myself something. So I've made an agreement with that inner part of my own awareness. Now, maybe that's the soul. I don't know. But I've made an agreement to listen to it and to talk to it. And so I ask myself continually throughout the day, well, why am I noticing this? Or what's the good reason in why this might be happening? And that way I get my guidance and my intuitive insight kind of regularly throughout the day. But it also makes me trust my insides. there's a tendency to be almost energetically merged with your own child, at a whole body level.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a slightly different sort of thing, because it's almost like your DNA is overlapping, and the whole energy fields are merged. So you will tend to know almost empathically what's going on with your family members. It's common, even like when a sibling dies or a parent dies or they're getting ready to, that you'll start to get fidgety and you'll start to know something's going on, but you won't know what it is. So I think that the kids have this special tendency to, let's say, be telepathic or be able to raise their consciousness into some of those higher realms. But then again, they also have more problem bringing that knowledge down through the body, because they have more ADD and more environmental allergies and things that are disturbances in the physical body. And so I think part of the challenge with the kids, training in intuition development and in how to stabilize the energies in their bodies.
Well, this ability to be intuitive, is it physical, or is it coming from the subconscious? Is it coming from out there in the universe?
Yeah. Well, in a way, it's coming from both the higher dimensions and from the physical realm itself. But intuition is operative, let's say, when your mind comes into your body and centers inside the body in the present moment. So when the mind and body merge, then you become aware of the spirit. Mind, body, and spirit all come together at the same time, and you have a total unity of awareness. So when that happens, and you can just get centered in yourself, let's say, the body will constantly be picking up, let's say, signals, from the field around you. That could be about whether you're safe or whether you're in danger or whether a house feels good to go in or not good to go in. And that is a kind of intuition. It starts off sort of as instinct.
Yeah.
And that rises up the spine and comes up into the brain through the old reptile brain first. And you get those fight or flight signals, I call that in my book the truth signal and anxiety signal. So when something's right for you, you get excited and it bubbles and it rises up and you get warm and you lean towards something. And when it's not right for you, or when you hear a lie, you get contracted and it feels solid and heavy like a wet blanket's on top of you,
And still
But you know that instinctually, and that's a part of the lower brain. Now then it keeps rising up and it goes into the middle brain, which is where all the senses are. And that's where intuition starts to take on that sensory information of the vibration, the little voice in your head, the visions, the flashes of insight. Those are the inner senses, the subtle inner senses. And that's part of the way intuition makes itself known. It activates those inner senses. Now, whether you think you're smelling it or you're actually smelling it, in a certain way, your inner self doesn't know the difference. You're trying to get through to yourself to give yourself some information. So whatever works, and that may be a vision. It might be a dream, and so that comes in as well and needs to be grounded and made meaningful. So intuition rises and it descends.
Have you found that people who tend to have these abilities are more spiritual than those who do not have the abilities?
I think that, some people open up in strange ways, sometimes suddenly, sometimes they have various psychic abilities. But I think that intuition is a broader thing than a single psychic ability, for instance. And that as you start working with opening yourself into a direct intuitive knowing, it almost always takes you into the spiritual realms. And it's not necessarily religious. It could be much more like mysticism, where you have direct connection with the Godhead or with nature or something. But I think that real true intuition always connects you with spirit. a lot of what has happened to me has come from visionary dreams. And I had a visionary dream quite a few years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, where I was talking to a healer in my dream, and the man said to me, he'd been working on the East Coast, and he said, you know, those suits, meaning the business people, are very solid, and meaning that their belief systems were very tight and it was hard to get through to them. And I said, yes, I know. And he looked over at me and said, well, you're right on schedule. And I looked down and my left arm was transparent.
Jeez.
And I thought, oh, that's right. We're supposed to learn how to become transparent. And then I remembered in the dream that we were coming up to this time period where something was going to happen that I'd been waiting for lifetimes. And it was going to be a huge event coming in maybe 25 years or so. So it would put it probably somewhere between 2012 and 2020. And then this dream revealed itself in stages. And the next stage was it's told me that this was called the void, the event. And that during this experience, we would have to become like the void in order to survive the void. And that meant transparent, holding nothing, being, no solid places within ourselves in terms of emotions or fixed beliefs, just being totally open and in the moment.
Have you used your intuition for, getting a better position or income or health or anything like that?
I would say I use it every day. I use it to gauge timing, to know even just when to leave the house. Because I pay attention to my body signals. And if an opportunity comes and it feels free and flowing and I lean toward it, well, then I go with it. And if I feel a tenseness or a withdrawal or a contraction, then I sometimes say no, and sometimes I do it, but I'm very wary, and I watch it as I'm going along.
How do you know you're not making an emotional decision as opposed to an intuitive?
I think that just comes with practice, George. It's that an emotional decision often is coming out of a bias that you might have of wanting something very, very badly, or not wanting to disappoint someone, or coming out of childhood programming or something like that. And you make those decisions and you find out that often they don't work, right? You get in trouble.
So true. You can't, sometimes it seems, Penny, that you can't push for things. You just got to let it happen, let it evolve.
That's right. So if there's that sort of extra, energy on something, it may not work out. When you're nonplussed and sort of neutral, and you have that truth signal that's in the body, that sense of openness and cheerfulness and sort of like expansion and childlike enthusiasm, then it's usually accurate. And I have just learned to trust that, by making mistakes. When you start seeing the world as made of energy, and that happens because we are getting faster, we're starting to identify ourselves as not so much as solid bodies separated by empty space, but as energy beings living in a field of energy, in a sea of energy, and waves moving through that sea of energy and through us, that we ourselves are vibrating and sending off waves and vibrations that communicate who we are to the world and to other people.